Hey guys, Cronus Falls here, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the best poisoners for the clan boss. So I'm not going to go over every poisoner in the game today, but just those that I think can be at least somewhat viable in the boss. And I'll be going in order, first of all, of category. So that would be uncommon, then rare, then epic, then legendary. And in each of those categories, I'll be going down from what I think is the worst in that category to the best, just of the champions that I am showing. And I wouldn't say that they're in perfect order. I was just kind of going through looking at them. So you can switch them around a little bit based on who you think might be a little bit better. But this is kind of my first impressions as far as comparing them all. So first category is uncommon. And we are going to be looking in the sacred order for Outlaw Monk. Now he's probably the only uncommon in the game that people would bring into clan boss. And that's because of his A2 here. Places two 5% poison debuffs on the target for 2 turns. That's on a 3-turn cooldown when booked. And so this is pretty solid, especially for early game. Not a lot of poisoners can get out that much poison for you. He does have a really low base defense though, and his speed is just okay. So he's definitely not coming into higher level clan boss, but for maybe up through hard, I would say Outlaw Monk will do just fine for you. Also in his A1, he attacks one enemy, and when booked has a 25% chance of granting an extra turn, which is pretty solid. That helps you to get around to the poisons faster. So overall, this guy's pretty good and can come into low level clan boss and do a lot for you. Let's go ahead and move on to the rare category now. So we're going to start in the undead hordes with Grave Chill Killer. The Grave Chill Killer is a pretty decent poisoner in her own right, but when paired with Frozen Banshee, she actually becomes really good. So the A1 attacks one enemy, and when booked has a 50% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff for 1 turn. So, I mean, that's alright, 50% chance. That's basically Kale's A1, but it's a 5% poison instead of a 2.5%, so pretty good. On her A2, attacks one enemy, and if you have a poison up already, it has a 75% chance, 100% when booked, of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff. Like I said, if they're under a poison debuff, it'll only be 30% if they are not. And that is on a 3-turn cooldown. So if you come in there and you get some poisons going first, so let's say she's paired with Frozen Banshee. Let's go over the A3 first, then I'll go over this. So this A3 attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit places a 2.5% poison debuff for 2 turns, which is okay. But it places a 5% poison debuff instead if the target is under a poison sensitivity debuff. So basically, she's meant to be paired with Frozen Banshee. Frozen Banshee comes in, places the poison sensitivity. Then Grave Chill Killer comes in, uses her A3, gets 2 5% poisons going. And then the next turn when she comes around, she will do the decreased defense, get that 60% up. So pretty decent combo there. I would say she's not so great on her own. And I don't know if I would necessarily pair her with Frozen Banshee, just because Frozen Banshee can pretty much keep up the poisons all on her own, as long as your team is either fast enough or you're running a counterattack team. But, I mean, pretty decent if you don't have a decreased defense champion. She can definitely come in there and do that for you. Her base defense, again, is a little bit low, but not too bad, and her speed is just okay. So that is Grave Chill Killer. On to the next one, we are going to be looking at Rhea in the High Elves. So Rhea actually did not stand out to me at first, but she does have an interesting kit here that goes along with poisons. So her A2 attacks one enemy 3 times. Each hit has a 50% chance when booked of placing a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns. So this is very similar to Kale's. It's a 4-turn cooldown just like his, but it only hits 3 times instead of 4. So, I mean, it's basically just a worse version of Kale's, but she does make up for it a little bit by coming in with this attack. Lead the Charge is her A3, which attacks one enemy of 2 random allies. Allies joining the attack use their default skills. So if you have her in there with a Poisoner, an attack down champion, just basically people who have decent A1s, she can help them to reapply the debuffs. And that is on a 4-turn cooldown, so not too bad. It's only 2 allies, but she is a rare, so you can't expect a full team ally attack like someone. I think Longbeard is the only one who can do full team. Not really sure, but anyways, that's Rhea. She's pretty decent. She can get some poisons out there for you, and she's probably best when paired with another poisoner like a Kale or a Yaga the Insatiable, something like that. So let's go ahead and go on to the next one. We're going to be looking at the Dark Elves and Kale. So Kale is a starter champion and probably one of the best ones you can pick, and the reason for that is because he is the only poisoner out of them. So he's best known in the clan boss for his A3 here, which attacks 4 times at random, has a 50% chance when booked of placing a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns. This is on a 4-turn cooldown. So he can potentially place up to 4 poisons for you. Most likely though, you'd be coming in and expecting 2 of them to go off. So a pretty decent ability for a rare. Also on his A1, he attacks 1 enemy, has a 100% chance of placing a 2.5% poison debuff for 2 turns. So that's pretty okay as well. Doesn't really translate into higher level clan boss though, because you don't really want 2.5% poisons taking up debuff slots when you're in Nightmare, Ultra Nightmare, that kind of stuff. But I'd say Kale is definitely usable through Brutal. He does have 914 base defense, which is pretty decent for an attack champion, and 103 base speed is great for a rare. He also brings an HP aura in all battles, which is pretty solid. So if you don't have a good aura going into the clan boss, you can throw him in as your leader and get a little bit more HP on all of your allies. So that is Kale. Now we're going to be ending up the rare category with one of the best in the game, and that is Frozen Banshee. So since she had her AI fix, she is absolutely insane. She works really well on a speed team and absolutely godlike on a counterattack team, and here's why. First off, she comes in with her A3, which attacks 1 enemy and places a 25% poison sensitivity debuff for 2 turns. So that makes all of your poisons do 25% more damage. Let's say I'm on Ultra Nightmare, poisons are taken for 50,000. I get another, I think, 12,500 for each tick of poison, which really adds up. And then her A1 couples with that perfectly, which attacks 1 enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 100% chance when booked of placing a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns. So that is if they are under a poison sensitivity debuff. So she places the A3, and this is what makes her so insane on counterattack, because she comes in first turn, places the poison sensitivity. She'll do that on auto just fine. Then you go through, you get up your counterattack, the clan boss attacks, boom, you get 2 poisons on him. You go take your turn. This has gone down to 1 turn now, the poison sensitivity. You throw another 2 on him, and then he comes through and attacks you. You get the counterattack, and you get more poisons off on him. And it just keeps going like that. She can stack up the debuff bar full. You pretty much always want to have about 7 poisons running if possible, which would be absolutely amazing. She can definitely do that for you in a counterattack team, and that is what makes her one of the best poisoners in the game. She also does bring this aura, which is ally accuracy in all battles by 35. Not super impactful, but I mean, if you don't have the accuracy, I guess she could come in there and help you out with that. So that is it for the rare category. Now let's go ahead and go on to epics. So we're going to start out in Skinwalkers with Yaga the Insatiable. So Yaga the Insatiable is a free login reward at the 60-day mark, and he's there to kind of help you just get your poisons rolling on clan boss. I don't think he's quite as good as Kale as far as poisoners go, but let's go ahead and check out his kit here. First of all, his A2 attacks 1 enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 50% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns. This books up to a 75% chance, so pretty solid. It is on a 4-turn cooldown, so I mean, not that great, because this is why I don't think he's as good as Kale, because Kale comes in on a 4-turn cooldown and hits 4 times with 50%, which is more likely to get you more poisons than 2 times with a 75% chance. But I digress, because he does have the A1 here, which attacks 1 enemy and has a 50% chance when booked at placing a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns. So on a counterattack team, he'd be a little bit more solid coming in there, getting those poisons up on all of his counterattacks, or half of them anyways. So on a speed team though, I just don't think he's as viable as Kale. His A3 here, damage increases by 25% against targets under poison debuffs, so he does get a little bit more damage from that, but it's on a 4-turn cooldown. Doesn't apply any debuffs, it's kind of weak. And finally, he has an ally accuracy in all battles by 40 aura. Again, not that impactful typically, but if you're really struggling for accuracy, he can do that for you. So now let's go ahead and go on to Rowan. She is in the Banner Lords, and this is her right here. So she's actually a very interesting champion in that she scales on speed. She's the only one in the game, I believe, to do that. but she really does suffer in the defense department. She has a lot of attack, a lot of speed, but only 694 defense makes her very squishy for clan boss. So she does come in a little low on this list. And also on her A1, it has a 50%, 60% when booked, chance of placing a 100% heal reduction. This can go on the clan boss, but doesn't actually do anything, so you're wasting a debuff slot. The A2 here attacks 3 times at random. Each hit has a 30% chance of placing a stun. You can't stun the clan boss, so that doesn't help either. And finally, the A3 attacks 1 enemy 4 times. Each hit has a 50% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns. This books up to a 65% chance on a 4-turn cooldown. Not much better than Kale's. And Kale has the A1 that can poison as well. So honestly, Rowan does lose out to Kale as well, in my opinion, as far as poisoners go. But, and she's alright. She can definitely come in there and do some poison for you. And if you have her fast enough, because she does have that super high base speed, it is 5 higher than Kale's, then maybe you lap and get those turns back faster. But she is a lot squishier than Kale as well, so she probably won't last as long. So there are definitely trade-offs there. I think Kale's a little bit better, and her accuracy aura rather only affects faction crypts. So that's Rowan. Now we're going to go ahead and go on to Marksmen. So Marksmen got a little bit of a buff recently, if I recall. And basically, is A1 here attacks 1 enemy, places a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns if the attack is critical, so you do have to build crit rate on him. It has a 15% chance of granting an extra turn. So this is a pretty solid ability. You get a poison for sure as long as you build him to 100% crit rate. And you could get an extra turn as well, which is nice. Help you get back around and do poisons more often. On his A2, attacks 1 enemy, fills the turn meter of all allies by 20%, has an extra 15% chance of inflicting a critical. So a 20% turn meter boost on a 3-turn cooldown is also pretty solid, definitely helpful for a speed team. So he brings you a little bit of poison, a little bit of speed, and is pretty helpful in that regard. And finally, his A3 attacks 4 times at random. Each hit has a 25% chance to ignore defense, so this can hit kind of hard. Nothing too special there. And the accuracy, or the aura rather, only affects arena. So sorry if you can hear some construction going on next door. My apologies. Nothing I can really do about that though. So he does have a low base speed of 92, which is unfortunate, especially for a speed comp. And his defense is 892, which is not too bad for an attack champion. But still, I think a little bit outclassed by Kale as far as poison goes. He does provide a little bit more utility outside of that, so he could be a better choice for you. Let's go ahead and move on now to Khurram and the Undead. So Khurram right here on his A1 attacks 1 enemy, has a 50% chance when booked of placing a 5% poison for 2 turns. That's a decent A1 as far as poison goes. His A2 attacks 1 enemy, extra 15% chance of inflicting crit. Damage increases according to the amount of HP his champion has lost. Not too great there. And finally, on his A3, attacks 1 enemy, deals damage from all poison debuffs on the target instantly. So they actually nerfed this a while back. It only does damage for 1 poison per stack. So instead of getting the full 2-turn damage or 3-turn damage, whatever the poisons are at, you just get 1 turn of the damage. I don't know why I have him so high on here. Honestly, he should have probably been at the bottom of this category. I think I just forgot to move him accordingly. But as long as you're playing him on manual, he can get a decent number of poisons up. Nothing like what the other champions I've shown so far can do, though. And you really don't want to use the A3 because you'll actually be losing out on damage. So Khurram probably deserves to be at the bottom of this category. So now we're going to go ahead and go on to a Reni's. She is in the Demon Spawn, and she is right here. So she has a pretty interesting kit. A little bit, like, pretty good speed, 103. A little bit low defense, 881, but not terrible. On her A1, attacks 1 enemy, has a 100% chance when booked of placing a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns. So that's pretty solid, especially on a counterattack team. She can get in there and do some poisons. Also, on her A2, Almighty Curse, attacks all enemies, has a 100% chance when booked of increasing the duration of all debuffs on the target by 1 turn. So, I mean, that's pretty decent. She's got a little bit of debuff extension in there. She is a little lackluster, I have found in my tests with her, but I was running her on a speed team. I think she'd be a little bit better on a counterattack team. Finally, her A3 attacks one enemy, places a block buffs debuff for 2 turns. This can go in there and stop him from putting his attack up on. Not the best thing in the world, and it does take up a debuff slot, so could actually get in the way a little bit. If you're playing on manual, you don't have to worry about this, but most people play on auto. So if you're stacking your poisons all the way up through the roof, then this could get in the way. And finally, she has an ally accuracy in dungeons aura, so not helpful for clan boss. She's okay. I think she can definitely come in and do some work for you, especially on a counterattack team. And that is a Reni's. So let's go ahead and take a look at Cardinal now. So Cardinal is in the Sacred Order. She is a Void Epic. And while she's not the best poisoner in the game, her A1 attacks one enemy, has a 10% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns. This buffs up to a 20% chance with books. She, like I said, not the best poisoner in the world, only a 20% chance. She's not really doing any poison for you, but I still put her a little bit higher on this list just because she brings so much other utility. So her A2 heals a target ally by 30% of their max HP, places a 60% increased defense buff for 2 turns. So that's pretty solid. Some heals and some increased defense keep them alive, someone squishy probably. Then our A3 is where the real utility comes in, which is revives all dead allies, heals them by 25% of their max HP, and boosts their turn meter to max. So if you build her nice and tanky and fast, she can keep your team going quite a bit longer than they might otherwise be able to. So she definitely can't come in as a solo poisoner, but she can come in there to help you out a lot. She does have a good base defense of 1145, good base speed of 104, and that is Cardinal. So now let's go ahead and take a look at Othar, which I believe is also in the Sacred Order here. There we go. So Othar, at one time, was definitely one of the best poisoners in the game. He's lost his status a little bit as time has gone on, but he's definitely not bad. So I believe his A2 here is what we're looking at. Attacks 4 times at random. Each hit places a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns. This is on a 3-turn cooldown. So it's like Kale's ability, but 100% and 1 turn lower on the cooldown. So he's basically the improved version of Kale as far as this ability goes. And it's pretty solid. I mean, 5% poisons on a 3-turn cooldown. That's a lot of damage. Unfortunately, his A1 just has a chance of stealing a random buff. And his A3 attacks one enemy, places a block cooldown skills for 2 turns. Not at all helpful in the clan boss. His aura's ally attack him in all battles by 21%. So if you don't have a better option, you could use this. But honestly, definitely not the best thing you could go for. So he works best on a speed team for certain. You want him to be coming around doing this ability as often as possible, keeping those poisons stacked up, and he can do pretty decent for you. So that's Othar. Now we're going to go ahead and go on to Corpse Collector in the Undead Hordes. So Corpse Collector here is actually a little bit better now that she's gotten a bit of a buff. So her A1 here attacks one enemy, has a 40% chance, 50 when booked, of placing a leech debuff for 2 turns. So I never would have put her this high on the list before, but with this ability now, with Leech being buffed, she is actually quite good because, especially on a counterattack team, when you're using your A1 a lot, keeping that Leech applied could potentially actually replace Lifesteal for you. So Leech is a very good debuff now, and could potentially change the entire dynamic of your team if you get everyone in there in better gear, because Lifesteal obviously isn't giving you any sort of advantage to your stats. Maybe you get everyone in there in defense gear or life gear, something like that, something that can help you last longer. Then that would be amazing to boost up your damage. And then her A2 here is a little bit annoying. I don't like it on her, but has a 75% chance, 100 when booked, of placing a 100% heal reduction debuff and a 50% decreased accuracy debuff on all enemies for 2 turns. This does not help at all against the clan boss. You do not want to book this if at all possible. But her A3 is what we're really here for today, which attacks 3 times at random. Each hit has a 100% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns when booked, and places a veil debuff on the champion for 1 turn. So she can hide herself, she can place 5% poisons. It is on a 4-turn cooldown, which is a little bit long, But I'd say with this and the leech debuff, she does squeak up above Othar a little bit. She won't do quite as much poison damage, but does bring a little bit more overall utility to the clan boss. So that's Corpse Collector. Now we're going to get on to, I'd say, the big three as far as epics go for poisoners. So first we're going into Skinwalkers to look at Steel Skull. So Steel Skull here, again, kind of like Cardinal, doesn't do the most poisons, but does provide a lot of outside utility. So his A1 here attacks one enemy 2 times, has a 35% chance when booked of placing a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns. That'd be 40% with the sniper ability. So if he comes into a counterattack team, he could potentially do the A1, have 2 chances at 40%, maybe get one of them off in order to get a poison, and then when he counterattacks, hits twice more, get another poison. So he can definitely build up. He's not going to be a main poisoner typically. You do need someone else to come in there with him. But he does provide a cleanse on a 3-turn cooldown with his A2 here. His cleansing spell removes all debuffs from a target ally, then heals them by 50% when booked. Pretty solid, definitely some good support, keeping your team alive and not stunned, which is very important on the counterattack team especially. Unfortunately, speaking of this on a counterattack team though, you do have to play him on manual if you want the cleanse to go off at the right time. Otherwise, he will mess up your rotation by not using it because he prioritizes the A3 here, protection, places a 60% increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns, which is very nice, and heals all allies by 20% of their max HP. This is on a 4-turn cooldown when booked and 30% of their max HP when booked. So definitely a lot of good sustain here. Like I said, it is a little annoying that he will prioritize this over the cleanse even if someone is stunned, but for the time being, that is just how it is. His aura is also very good for faction crypts, but does not affect us here in Clan Boss. So that is Steel Skull, definitely a lot of good support, can definitely be a great backup poisoner for you. And let's move along to Giuliana. So Giuliana is in the Sacred Order. And let's see, where is she? Right here. So Giuliana attacks one enemy 2 times on her A1. Each critical hit fills this champion's turn meter by 10%. So this just kind of helps her get back around to her poisons faster, which are on her A2 here. So places a 30% increased crit rate buff on this champion, then attacks one enemy 2 times, places a 5% poison debuff on the target for 3 turns if the attack is critical, will ignore 50% of the target's defense when Romero is on the same team. So you're probably not going to have Romero on the team. You don't want him. He's not that great for Clan Boss, but getting 2 5% poisons for 3 turns is pretty solid. It is on a 5-turn cooldown, which is really slow, but you just need to build her fast. You need to build her with 70% crit rate because she can bump it up the rest of the way. And put her on a speed team. She can definitely come in, get some poisons going off for you. If these were only 2-turn cooldowns, sorry, hit my mic there. If these were only 2-turn poisons, then it would not be nearly as good. But she can actually crank out a surprising amount of damage. And then we look at the A3 here. Attacks one enemy, removes 1 random debuff from the target. Or 1 random buff from the target, rather. Has a 75% chance of placing an HP burn debuff for 3 turns. So an HP burn on top of the poisons helps her to pump out some more damage. This is a 100% chance when booked, but it does take a lot of books, unfortunately. So between the HP burn and the poisons, she can definitely crank out some good damage, and that's why I've put her in the number 2 slot of the poisoners for epics. She also brings ally crit rate in arena by 20%, which makes absolutely no sense. She's not an arena champion. I don't know why that's in there, but that is Giuliana. So finally, the big OB in the Ogrin tribes, Occult Brawler himself. Now, he was the undisputed best poisoner in the game, and that's just for poison damage. You know, he doesn't bring a whole lot of other utility, but if you're just looking to put out damage, this guy was the absolute undisputed king until Frozen Banshee came along, because she can potentially do it better. Let's take a look here. His A1 attacks one enemy, has a 50% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns. This books up to a 60% chance. So that's pretty solid. 60% chance to get the poison going. His A2 here It does a lot, so I'm not going to go over all of it, but basically the more debuffs he has on, the more extra stuff it can do, from healing him to granting him an extra turn, that kind of stuff. The extra turn is nice, though, because it comes in with his passive. So his passive places a 2.5% poison debuff on this champion for 4 turns at the start of each turn, and when he is ascended to 3 stars, has a 70% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff on a random enemy for 4 turns at the start of each turn. So 4 turns is absolutely nuts. It could be 5 turns with Master Hexer, 75% chance with Sniper. And so even though neither of his poison abilities have a 100% chance to land, they can definitely start to add up. You definitely want him on a speed team, preferably, although he, with his A1 doing the poisons as well, he can do just fine on a counterattack team. I just think with his passive, it is a little bit better to get him going more turns. But either way, he puts out a ton of damage. He can stack that debuff bar for you fully, and you could easily expect him to do over 10 million damage on Ultra Nightmare with a good team. So Occult Brawler, one of the top 2 for sure. As far as just straight up poison damage goes, he and Frozen Banshee are right up in there. So now let's go ahead and get into the legendary category. So we're going to start with the High Elves and Elenarl. Up here, where is she? I think she is this one. There we go. So Elenarl can place an HP burn on her A1, and so HP burn ticks for, I think, 50,000 on the Ultra Nightmare clan boss, or actually 75,000, I believe, once he when it's on a legendary. So 75,000, and it's guaranteed on the A1, cannot be resisted, which is pretty solid. The A2 here attacks all enemies, places a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns, places a second 5% poison debuff for 2 turns if the attack is critical, so you do need to build her in crit in order to get the most out of this. And so that's 2 poisons on a 3-turn cooldown, pretty solid. Match that with the HP burn, and she's basically just a better version of Giuliana. And then finally, the thing that actually hurts her here, even though you might not think it, deals damage from all poison debuffs to all enemies instantly. So like I said before, this was nerfed a little bit, so it's only doing the damage of 1 poison per stack, and it removes them. So honestly, she makes you do less damage if you use the A3. If you're going manual, she is actually a very good poisoner, very good HP burn, and she does have really good base defense for an attack champion. So that makes it a little bit easier to build her crit rate up to 100% and still get some decent defense out of her. So that's Elenarl. Let's go ahead and move on to the Dark Elves instead of the High Elves, and that will be Sevilla. Why do I keep going down? So Sevilla, on her A1, attacks one enemy 3 times. Each hit has a 40% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns. So this is a really solid A1. You can get a lot of poison stacking up on it. Goes well on a counterattack team especially. On her A2, attacks all enemies 2 times. Each hit has a 50% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns. So again, more poisons you can stack up. This is a 75% chance when booked. And so she can really do a lot for you as far as poisons go. This one doesn't really matter for clan boss, basically blocks revive. But here it deals damage from all poison debuffs on the target instantly. Poison debuffs will only deal half of the standard damage when this skill hits bosses. So again, it was nerfed, as I said, and you're taking off the poisons. So she actually, if you use her on auto, will use this Deadly Catalyst ability and tank your damage. She's really good on manual, but I do have her towards the bottom of the list just because of that. Also, her defense is super low, so very hard to keep alive. She does have good base speed though. And then her A4 is pretty good for waves. This is what makes her great for speed farming. Actually, this is only available when Bellinor's on the same team, so never mind. Don't even worry about that. And finally, her aura, increase ally attack in all battles by 33%. Not great for clan boss. Attack auras typically aren't the best, but if you don't have any other options, I guess she could do that for you. So now let's go ahead and move on to Tomb Lord, who is in the Knights Revenant. So let's see, where's the Knights? There we go. So Tomb Lord actually is pretty solid champion now. He used to be kind of bad, but they buffed him up a little bit. And so his A1 doesn't really help us at all on Clan Boss because it's just a decreased speed. But his A2 comes in here, has a 70% chance, which books up to a 100% chance of placing two 5% poison debuffs on all enemies for 1 turn. The hit is critical, it has a 100% chance of placing 4 5% poison debuffs on all enemies for 1 turn. So 4 poisons on a 3-turn cooldown if you get his crit up is pretty solid. He also, on his A3, resets the turn meters of all enemies with less than 50% HP, so that won't affect the clan boss at all, but has a 100% chance when booked of placing a 50% decreased attack debuff on all enemies for 2 turns. Also has a 100% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff on all enemies for 2 turns, and grants an extra turn if an enemy's turn meter is reset by the skill, which it would not be on the clan boss. That's on a 5-turn cooldown. He gets decreased attack, decreased defense. So he can't be a main decreased attack or decreased defense champion, but he can definitely come in there and bolster up the one you have in. So he is a little bit difficult to build up tanky because you do need crit rate on him to get the most out of his poisons. He's definitely not the biggest poisoner out there, but he can definitely provide you some good support in the clan boss and should not be overlooked. His aura is only for arena, so nothing to worry about there as far as clan boss goes. That is Tomb Lord. So let's take a look at the big 3 as far as poisoners and legendaries go. We are going to start with Bad El-Khazar. Now this guy doesn't put out the most poisons in the game, but his abilities, all 2 of them, are just good. So his A2 here removes all debuffs from all allies, so it's a cleanse. It works properly with counter attacks, so you can get him in there and he will properly keep your team from being stunned. Also places 2 15% continuous heal buffs on all allies for 2 turns. Boom, you don't need lifesteal anymore. This guy takes care of it. Places 2 5% poison debuffs on all enemies for 2 turns. So 2 poisons for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. Not that strong as far as poisons go. But with his passive here, all allies inflict 15% more damage against targets under poison debuffs. So this just ramps up your damage. You're always going to have poison debuffs on them, assuming you bring him in here with a backup healer, and even if, or a backup poisoner rather, and even if you don't, it'll still be most of the time. His aura only increases ally crit rate in all battles by 25%. Nothing really to worry about there. Not typically worried about crit rate too much unless you're in a super high-end clan boss team. And finally, his A1 attacks all enemies, heals this champion and all allies by 20% of the damage inflicted. You're probably not going to be doing too much with this. It is based on attack, but you want to build him more tanky. But still, just a little bit more healing never hurts. So that's Bad El-Khazar, definitely one of the top legendaries in the game, and a pretty solid poisoner at that. Now let's go ahead and move on to Nethril, also in the Undead Hordes. So this guy probably is on par with a Cult Brawler as far as poisons go, if you just use his A1. You have to play him on manual to get the same kind of use, because on his A1 he attacks one enemy 3 times, has a 50% chance when booked of placing a 5% poison debuff 2 turns. So, I mean, it's pretty solid. He can come in there, he hits 3 times, 50%, so you'd expect either 1 to 2 poisons to come off of that. When he's on a counterattack team, that would mean every turn he would be getting double that. So he can definitely stack him up full, but he does have these 2 other abilities here that don't help at all. One decreases turn meter, one stuns and decreases speed. Very good for dungeons, but not at all a help in clan boss. So it does hinder his damage a little bit if you bring him into clan boss and run him on auto. I still put him this high up on the list though, because he is definitely capable of being one of the best in the game. And finally, we're going to talk about the god of clan boss himself, Dracomorph. So Dracomorph, absolutely insane since his rework. He comes in here, his A1 is really good for waves in dungeons when he kills an enemy. First of all, damage increases by 10% for each debuff on the target. Will attack one random enemy with any surplus damage if the target is killed. Damage inflicted is equal to triple the surplus damage. So let's say they have 3 debuffs on them when he comes in. He hits them, does 30% extra damage, kills them easy, and then has another 20k left over. Boom, he hits them for 60k, something like that. It's just absolutely crazy for waves. His A2 here attacks 4 times at random. Each hit places a 5% poison debuff for 3 turns. This is on a 3-turn cooldown, so very strong. You get 4 poisons up there on him and 3-turn cooldowns, so you're keeping him up pretty often. If you got him on a speed team, he is just coming around and doing this constantly. And then what makes him just absolutely superb for a clan boss is on a 3-turn cooldown, he comes in here and places a 25% weaken and a 60% decreased defense debuff on all enemies for 2 turns. Absolutely nuts. These are 2 of the best debuffs you can put on the clan boss besides attack down. And he just comes in and does it for free because he can't be affinity countered on it since it does not hit. Just absolutely an insane champion. Dracomorph is probably the best poisoner in the game. Save one other option that we're going to bring up here, but I think he's probably a little bit better. And finally, increase ally accuracy and faction cribs by 50. Nothing special for clan boss here, but we are going to finally go ahead and take a look at someone who is definitely of the same caliber as Dracomorph, and that is Venus. So Venus is one of the most coveted champions in the game. She is a Void legendary, and she just absolutely rocks every piece of content you come across. Her A1 here attacks 1 enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 50% chance of placing a 5% poison for 2 turns. Great on counterattack teams, can come in here and put up some poisons for you. On her A2, attacks all enemies, has a 75% chance of placing, that's 100% when booked by the way, of placing a 60% decreased defense and 25% weaken for 2 turns. Just like Dracomorph, she cannot be affinity countered because she is Void, and she can come in and actually hit with it, so she's doing some damage. Just absolutely nuts. On her A3, attacks all enemies, has a 75% chance of placing an HP burn for 2 turns. She's a legendary, so that'll do 75,000 damage per tick on the HP burn. It's on a 4-turn cooldown. And her A4 here, you probably won't have Cupidus with her, but if you do, removes all buffs from all enemies and has a 50% chance of granting an extra turn. Not great for clan boss, but absolutely amazing for something like Arena. And finally, her aura increased ally HP in all battles by 33%. A great aura, not quite as good as if it was defense, but still really solid. She's a support champion. She's got insane base HP. Her base defense is decent, and her base speed is absolutely insane, 112, one of the highest in the game. So that's why I've brought Venus to you as number 1. You could argue that Draco might be a slightly better poisoner, but she just brings all around better utility, and so she is number 1 in my book. So that's it for poisoners on the clan boss, guys. I hope you guys found this interesting and informative. Hope it helps you out going forward. I appreciate you guys watching. Join the Discord or leave a comment down below if you have anything you'd like to talk about, and thanks.